Hei og velkommen til en ny episode av SMB Norge Podcasten. Og som vår forrige spesialepisode som kom ut for noen dager siden, så handler også denne om internasjonalt samarbeid mot Ukraina spesifikt da, i denne omgangen. Denne debatten er også innspilt på Stortingsrom S447 på Stortinget, som sagt. Ledet og ordstyret av godeste Pål Arne Davidsen. Han er da medlem av SMB Norges internasjonale utvalg. Han er partner Rud Pedersen Public Affairs, og i tillegg så er han tidligere statssekretær i Utenriksdepartementet. Og den blir tatt på engelsk, denne debatten, med blant annet tidligere ambassadør for Ukraina, professor Igor Podoliev, Jorun Sigrid Nossum, leder av Norads Ukraina-avdeling, Steinar Hoel, Korsmo, president i Seed Forum Global. Og selvfølgelig så er Nansen-pakken og de 75 milliardene som foreløpig er tildelt der har veldig mye fokus her. Pluss hvordan man skal utvikle Ukraina og bygge det opp igjen etter forhåpentligvis en normalisert tilstand, hvor lang tid det kan da ta. Husk også å gi oss en 5-stjerners rating i Apple Podcast og Spotify. Skriv gjerne en liten omtale av SMB Norge Podcasten i Apple Podcast og del oss med dine venner. Det betyr mye. Her kommer da debatten fra Stortinget om næringssamarbeid med Ukraina.
So, again, to introduce the panelists, on my right-hand side here we have Igor Podoliev. He has a very impressive background. He's currently professor and senior researcher of the Aalto University in Helsinki. He was the first ambassador of Ukraine to Scandinavia. He's former executive director for Ukraine, Moldova, Armenia, and Georgia in the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, in London. He is also former Minister of International Trade for Ukraine and advisor to former President Leonid Kuchma. So you're most welcome. On his right, we have Steinar Korsmo, who's a serial entrepreneur, founder of Seed Forum Global, which by time has become a global network organization with entrepreneurship, seed and venture capital as a focus. He has been in charge of more than 100 bilateral donor projects in Africa, South America, Eastern Europe, and the Balkans, and has for over 20 years conducted pitch training and pitch forums for more than 10,000 startups and investors. He's also the co-founder of iHub and has become a key person in the involvement of the Ukrainian innovation system. And then, last but not least, we have Jorun Sigrid Nossum, who is, apart from being my former colleague, she's also assistant director in NORAD and has been tasked with heading the Nansen program in NORAD, which is the biggest aid program focusing on one single country in Norway's history, basically. So, not a small task. We're talking about quite substantial funds, up to 75 billion NOK in a 5-year period, where NORAD has been tasked with carrying out the humanitarian and civilian aid on that. So maybe to start with Jorun, we're familiar with the concept too big to fail, and you're currently setting up basically the structure of the program, and if I'm not mistaken, the transfer of the management to NORAD should be completed by 1st of September, which is just around the corner. Could you, just as a brief introduction, shed some light on the program, how it's structured, and how NORAD is thinking of carrying out that substantial task?
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to come here. It's nice to meet you all, and looking also forward to the discussion afterwards. No, so the decision of transferring the management, the responsibility of the management of the program, was taken in June, and as you also said, we haven't really taken it over yet. It will come to us next week, so we are preparing for that. But I think it's important to say, and my colleagues in the ministry, they are not here, but it's important to say that the decision of moving the program to NORAD does not sort of reflect any lesser priority from the minister's side. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will, of course, be very, very engaged in the program still, and also a broader sort of the government, of the official government from the Norwegian side, including the Prime Minister's office, where also our Prime Minister himself is, of course, very engaged in the program. And as we see, he's today lucky enough to visit Kyiv, and are happy to see that. So the management of the program is what's our responsibility, and of course all the strategic decisions, the political decisions, and so on will still, of course, remain with the government and with the parliament and such. I think it's important to say that, so we just understand the division of labor there. But of course, you said it's too big to fail. And I think, I mean, we can sense that responsibility. It's a large program. It's, as you said, it's the largest program to one single country in the history. But at the same time, the situation is so extreme and the needs are so acute. And so failure, when you say failure, it sounds so definite. But I think we need to prepare ourselves, I think, in this context, that if not going to fail, but we will do things with a high risk. We will have to do things fast. We will have to take fast decisions. We will have to work under circumstances that we are not used to. So I think, of course, we are never happy with failure, but I think we should also accept some type of risk in this situation in order sort of to help in what is an urgent need. And I think that risk is also reflected in the political sort of program around. I think we are all. It's not something that we are hiding. You know, it's really it's up there, and we know about that. At the same time, and I think that's important to say. And I guess a lot of you from who are working together with Ukrainian partners, even if we are not experienced with that country, it's very clear to us that we are working with a completely different country than usually. I mean, we meet sort of a governmental bodies with a high capacity, very highly educated. You know, it's very different than a lot of other countries that we and you yourself has been involved with. And I think that also gives a lot of potential. A lot of potential for the partnerships we have between our countries, but also in different sectors, including the private sector. So I think it gives a lot of potential as well. But of course, with sort of a context of risk that it always is when you have a high sense of conflict. We don't know how, you know, it's difficult to plan. We don't know how the situation will develop, and so on. And the same time, things shall go fast. So a lot of challenges, but I think we are ready for them.
Mm. So before I give the word to Igor and Steinar, one of the discussions we had in the past, around 10 years ago, was you have business promotion, and then you have business development, and then there are watertight bodies, roofs, walls behind and between those two. So I think the multi-billion-dollar question that a lot of the representatives here have is, of course, will there be a role for small and medium-sized Norwegian enterprise? We know that you will probably channel most of the funds through the multilateral organizations, but I just want to challenge a little bit, and maybe you haven't decided exactly how things will be rolled out, but
no, I think this is part of a broader discussion, and from the start, some of the choices, and those are important choices, I think, has been made to work through large partners that we know from before, and that we know has capacity to work in situations like that. And that includes the World Bank, but also EBRD, which is quite new to us, but glad to hear that you know it well, and the UN agencies, of course, and some of the large civil society organizations. So for us, that has to do with our knowledge of these partners, but it is also important, I think, to say that when I meet with Ukrainian partners, colleagues, they are also emphasizing the importance of working with fewer partners, because there is also a coordination issue on that side. But these are things that we need to understand better. But from a first start, I think it makes sense to work through large partners. And then to your question, where's the role here for smaller and medium-sized enterprises? And I think if you look at sort of the broad picture and the needs from Ukraine now and in the years to come, and I think this will not be solely financed by domestic mobilization itself. It cannot be. It cannot be financed by international support either. So the role of the private sector here is extremely important. And then, if we can look at what has to do with development, and that is a development aid, an official budget. And that is sort of an interesting area to explore. And first of all, it's interesting to see how our partners can work together with our multilateral partners Is there a role there or a partnership there together with EBRD, together with the World Bank, etc.? And I know we have experiences there. And for some, I think maybe for smaller enterprises, it's more difficult to access those types of partners and those types of funds than there is for larger actors. I know Scatec, for example, is working well with EBRD. So there is sort of an area there to explore. And then, of course, the question, what about the rest? And will there be sort of instruments, mechanisms, programs, etc., for other types of support? And that is a bit early to say. We have some experience with other sort of programs that we already have. You know them even better than I do. Is there something there? Do we have experiences that we can draw from already existing programs? And then, of course, because of the situation, there are higher risk for enterprises to invest in Ukraine now. Some insurance companies are withdrawing. So we are also looking into sort of mechanisms, instruments where public funds can work together with private investments, or mobilize extra investments. So that sort of instruments that can de-risk private investments is an area that we are interested in. But it's too early for me to say what that will exactly look like. And this is also a debate beyond NORAD, and the decision beyond NORAD. This is a debate that will be taken by our politicians and by our ministry and so on. But we have some interesting experiences, and it's quite interesting also to see the broad engagement in Norway. And from what I understand, but I'm new in this job, but from what I understand, there are connections in quite a broad areas, different sectors, and I understand also that we see ourselves at least as well positioned to work together with our Ukrainian partners in this context.
Thank you very much, Igor. With your extensive background, taking us through your experience and the lessons learned, and what Norway and small and medium-sized Norwegian enterprise could do in Ukraine would be probably not. We would probably be here next week as well, but. Now we're counting 24th of August. What would be your best recommendation for kind of promoting business, entrepreneurship, free trade in Ukraine? What is the role for Norwegian SMEs, and what are the push and pull factors basically in this equation? What could be done from Ukrainian authorities, and what should Norway, as a big donor with also reputable companies like some mentioned here, with Scatec, with Statkraft, Equinor, etc. What could we do?
Well, thank you very much for a very interesting question. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for the invitation to take part in this meeting. Secondly, thank you very much again for congratulations with the Independent Day of Ukraine, and thanks a lot to the Norwegian Parliament and to the Norwegian government for the unbelievable present for our Independent Day, because your fund, Nansen Fund, is really unbelievable for the current economy. It's huge amount, very interesting direction for the implementation, and believe me, for Ukraine, this decision will play a crucial role not only during the following 5 years. It will be extremely important for the many generation of the free, independent, and democracy Ukraine. I am sure in this. Now, coming back about the possibility for small and medium business of Norway to do business in Ukraine. I am sure that in the near future, at least, speaking about 5 years, you will have a huge possibility to do, I'd like to underline, rather profitability and effective business in my country. Why? First of all, you know that Ukrainian current economy is a typical heritage of the former Soviet Union economy, unfortunately. We have a lot of heavy industry, we have very high level of the energy cost, we have very high level of environmental risk, etc., etc., etc. That's why I am sure that now we have to speak not about Ukrainian needs to rebuild the economy. We have to speak about to construct, to build absolutely new economy on the modern high technical level or basis, and plus with zero level corruption. This is extremely important for any business, but especially extremely important for small and medium-sized businesses. Of course, Ukraine will continue to be industrial and agrarian country. It's no doubt. But speaking about industry of Ukraine, I am sure that industry of Ukraine has to be dramatically restructured. First of all, number one priority is, of course, agricultural sector. I'd like to explain why. Because Ukraine was the breadbasket for Europe coming back in Tsar time. Ukraine is maybe on the same level. Only one figure. 1 year ago, when a little bit more, when this grain export agreement with participant of Turkey and Russia Federation was signed, in Odessa, Ilyichovsk, and Nikolaev, there were altogether more than 32 million grains. 32 million grains. It marks that Ukraine is, and believe me, will be one of the best exporter of the agricultural products. It's understandable. But now this sector of economy has a very difficult and very dangerous problem, because a lot of land now were mined by the Russian troops. I am speaking about the area between 180 till 200,000 square kilometers. Ladies and gentlemen, it means that practically, it means the half territory of Norway. That's why I am sure that speaking about the following at least 5, 6, 7 years, the main role in agricultural sector will play medium and side business, not only Norwegian, of course, it's understandable, and Ukrainian, and from other countries, but in any case, only one remark. The scale of the land is much more simply synchronized with the scale of the mining. That's why I am sure that this process, by the way, has just started, but in the near future, it will be to increase dramatically. Secondly, speaking about the industry. Oh, sorry. If you only one remarks about agricultural sector, I am very sorry. Of course, it doesn't mean that only small medium business will be the key players. Of course, this sector needs a lot of support from international business. If you words, and I stopped. For example, our seaport terminals, Odessa, Nikolaev, Kherson, Izmail, Reni, etc. They are totally destroyed. Totally destroyed. Before the war, Ukraine had very developed infrastructure. 344 elevators, bunkers, etc., etc. 75 totally destroyed now, etc., etc. I don't speak about other. And of course, this is the area for big business, partly small, but previously big companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It would be very tempting to give the word back to Jorun, but we're going to go to Steinar. But just a very quick remark. In recent years in Norway, we have seen oil for development. We have seen fish for development. We have even seen tax for development. So the question would be, you're not going to be allowed to answer that now, and maybe for the political panel as well. Will we see agriculture for development? Because that would fit neatly with the development minister's priorities. But let's leave that a little bit and then give the word to Steinar Korsmo, and focusing on the innovation infrastructure of a country. What is your experience working with Ukrainian partners for the last decade or so? What are the lessons learned, and how could we establish more interaction bilaterally?
There are lots of opportunities. By the way, Slava Ukraina. I need to say that first. There are lots of ways of doing that, but first of all, I've been a part of basically creating a very important part of, let's call it the backbone of the Ukrainian innovation ecosystem for Ukrainian startups for the last 15 years. There are many different things that needs to be done in Ukraine to build, an innovation ecosystem 2.0. I'm not going to brag about what we've done already, but there is a major need to create, first of all, if we think vertical, I think first of all one needs support programs to basically create a volume of startups within different industries. We basically need to build the backbone further to what is built currently. That means co-working stations. We need to strengthen the national coordination in Ukraine, which is currently done by the so-called Ukrainian Startup Fund mainly, for basically evolving the further Ukrainian innovation system to 2.0, and as well in thinking that I think it was more than 70% of the technologies in the former military industrial complex of Ukraine was actually evolved in Ukraine. There is a major inheritance in Ukraine under the research institutions and universities, basically research institutions under the Ukrainian Academy of Science, which is very often forgotten. This is an enormous potential, not only for Ukraine, but also in a major cooperation with Norway for, let's say, spin-offs of technologies. So this is, in a way, what I would say as a horizontal thing that needs to be done or supported. Secondly, if we think, verticals, if you think about the horizontal thinking, definitely one needs to build the current innovations ecosystem and the backbone in Ukraine to a regional level, because right now it exists in the big cities, Kiev, Lviv, Vinnytsia, partly Odessa, and some more cities, but it needs to be strengthened on the regional level. One needs to create acceleration. By the way, the Ukrainian Startup Fund is possibly the only national development agency. It would be comparable to a beginning as we have of Innovation Norway, right, in Norway. A very powerful state-supported finance acceleration program, right? And this is very important to strengthen. Go-to-market means cooperation between the Ukrainian startup community and the Norwegian, for instance, Ukrainian startup community, and as well access to finance. Not necessarily access to private equity finance, but in a broader manner, access to finance. And who would be the focus groups for this? I would really hope that in a further cooperation with Norway, right? Well, hopefully under the Nansen-pakken support scheme, one would need particularly to focus on support to SMEs funded startups founded by veterans. Currently, if I remember the number correctly, it is more than 1 million veterans in Ukraine, and obviously not that number of wounded veterans, but that would be very important to support veterans to actually involve into to startup activity. One would need to think youth. We have young entrepreneurship in Norway, ungt entreprenørskap. We only see a start of that in Ukraine and an interface into the educational system. Female entrepreneurship, and definitely again, academians. Now, how does this fit with Norwegian SMEs? In our iHub in Kiev, 2,600 square meters, 100 meters from the center of Maidan, the biggest co-working station in Kiev. We have had major troubles with the war, obviously, and evacuations on the 25th of February last year. But currently, the activities is back in business. All those, by the way, who we evacuated last year are back in Ukraine. All of them, 100% of those startups which were evacuated in February last year are back in Kiev, back in Lviv, back in Vinica, right? Because they're evolving again back to business. And the business which they did before the war started. The opportunity of making contacts, right, between this and the Norwegian startup community is tremendous. Also in partnerships and strategic new ways of partnerships with evolving the Norwegian SME sectors into cooperation with Ukrainian SMEs, exactly into what Igor Podoliev just mentioned, into the respective industries of Ukraine. And right now we see that what is the main focus, I think, really, from the Norwegian startup community is within information technologies. But this has to be evolved further on to renewables, to other ways, not necessarily only within IT.
So, Jorun, renewables, agriculture, ICT, does it ring a bell? Is it in line with the priorities and what you're discussing in the development agency?
No, I mean, energy obviously has been a huge part of this. I think energy is always a huge part of any type of a situation like this. But of course, also the Norwegian response here has been crucial. For 2022, I think 35% of the support from Norway was in energy. And I think that will sort of, we don't know the size of that, but it will remain an important sector. I also learned, I'm learning, I'm also here to listen and learn, just to say that. But IT is also, and I was surprised to hear, I heard that from your colleagues, that in the IT sector, I think it's up to 98% of that cooperation has remained. So that is really not a sector where things have dropped, and that is quite impressive. I think it's also very inspiring listening to you, to hear the 100% of startups actually coming back. So it's an interesting situation of balancing sort of acute humanitarian needs and response that are still there, and we shouldn't forget that. But at the same time, balancing that with sort of very promising potential and development, and then that sort of eagerness. But when it comes to potential sectors, obviously energy will be there, and that's also if there is any sector where Norway has a comparative advantage, it must be there. IT sector is obvious. You asked, is there anything like an agricultural program, Agriculture for Development? Yes, there is. That was established a couple of years ago, but that is of course focused on different countries, poorer countries in Africa, but those countries are also heavily influenced by this situation. So this the war here has global consequences that we also see in other areas where we work. So we shouldn't forget sort of those needs as well. But it's interesting to hear your list of where you see the needs. And there are 3 areas that we are asked by the ministry to explore before November, and that is how to mobilize private investments. So look into instruments and mechanisms for that. But also to look into, is there any potential here for institutional development? And we're thinking public institutions, and that includes academic institutions that you also mentioned. And the last one is to see how one could support civil society organization in Ukraine. Because now a lot of the funds are channeled to international large civil society organizations, and that has, ironically enough, sometimes a conflict with, or not a conflict, but at least there are some dilemmas in how you at the same time make sure that civil society organizations within Ukraine not only remain secure, it's quite a strong civil society in Ukraine, but of course it's important that by working through the large international ones, that ones are not sort of drawing resources from existing and smaller organizations. That is always a dilemma when you come in, all these UN agencies, and that can offer higher salaries, etc. So it gives it has some consequences, and there are many dilemmas around that. But those are the three areas: public or governmental institutional cooperation, private investments, and civil society within Ukraine, and so that pretty much covers quite broadly. And we are working on coming up with suggestions, and then of course it's up to the ministry and to our politicians to decide sort of which direction this program will move in.
So we actually have most of the X for development. The only thing we're lacking is business for development. So Igor, could you comment a bit on going back to the push and pull factors, and with your background, what do you think also could be done in the very difficult situation in Ukraine to ease and to pull more businesses and investments to the country?
Okay, only one example. Steinar told about the innovation infrastructure which was created with strong support from Norwegian side. It's true. And I can illustrate how this infrastructure is working now in the war conditions. It's understandable that for Ukraine, one of the priority will be defense industry. Not only now, in the near future, because we will have a constant threat from our northern neighbor. It's understandable. And now, the structure of our defense industry is in the process of restructuring. Only one example. Speaking about 1.5 years previous, I mean war time, there were more than 50 kind of military drones created in Ukrainian startups, by the way, startups. The day before yesterday, new one among them was new one strike drone with distance between 10 and 1,200 kilometers and warhead 75 kilograms. I don't speak about the speed. I can underline that, and the cost of this product will be extremely low, even compared with Iranian, Shahed drones. That's why this absolutely new drone will move to the army 2 days ago, and we will have to wait the result of this weapon in the near future. What's important? All these 50 plus kind of drones were constructed by small startup collectives, 3, 5, maximum 10 persons, and the production base, once again, small and medium-sized enterprises. I know that this is the latest model. Altogether, 52 or 55 persons were involved in the technological process. That's why I am sure that, and your small and medium-sized business, which has a huge high-tech experience, will be involved in the near future with support of your fund, honorable fund, to this process. And it will be extremely important for Ukrainian during the war conditions, but it will be very, very profitable export product in the post-war time.
Thank you very much for also drawing attention to not only the civilian humanitarian aid, but also the more high-level foreign policy, defense policy that is impacting on Ukraine's ability to defend itself. We will touch more on that in the next panel. I think time flies. If there are any questions in the audience, so please.
Norwegian company, or at least the southern ones I know, they have their own Ukrainian entity vehicle to help and support Ukraine. Have you guys thought about supporting them to do something similar then already?
something similar to Denmark?
I don't know the details of the Danish deal.
No, I don't know the details there either. But I could just say, sort of in general, and what it's important to us, and I think it's fair to say that in this room, is that whatever we do, the main goal for our sort of program is to support Ukraine and support their needs. So we don't have as an overall goal to support Norwegian enterprises, you know? So just to understand the unconditional, and that is a bit different from Denmark. They have a different policy on that. But in Norway, that's sort of the overall policy. But that doesn't necessarily mean that our sort of instruments, programs, mechanisms are not profitable for Norwegian actors. But it's not sort of, our programs are unconditional of the Norwegian partners.
I spent 4 months in Ukraine last year, and I was about to Steinar as well. I think the Norwegian startup scene has a lot to learn, Igor, a lot to learn from Ukraine. So
Absolutely.
How they handle the stress at the moment and how they've been innovative.
Especially now, yes, you're right, absolutely.
I think there was one at the end of the table.
May I just skip in and say that the Ukrainian startup sector is very, very, very progressive.
I have a very quick question to Steinar. How would you compare the ecosystem for innovation in Ukraine with Norway? Because Norway has developed quickly the last 10 years. It would give us a picture of the state.
Well, it's difficult to say, percentage, but what I'm outlining is basically my thoughts of being a part of evolving the innovation system in several countries around the world, including particularly Ukraine. And the program that we have been building in Ukraine, for instance, for young entrepreneurship, which doesn't run anymore simply because of lack of finance, was simply a mirror of what we understood was done by young entrepreneurship in Norway, as an example, right? We've taken several other programs from Norway to implement them in several other countries, including Ukraine. That means access to finance, for instance, within go-to-market, within pitch trainings and things like this, basically. But to understand this, we've seen mainly an involvement of the Norwegian innovation ecosystem, may I say, into co-working stations during the last 7, 8, 9, less than 10 years. In Ukraine, this happened during the last 4, 5 years, right? We opened our first iHub in Ukraine, in small iHub in Kiev, previous premises back in 2012. Now we have almost 3,000 square meters in Kiev, right? We have a big one in Lviv, a big one in smaller one in Vinnytsia, but this was done during the latest years. So the difference here is that not only Ukraine, but several other countries in east of Europe, when they come, they go fast. And Ukrainians go very, very, very fast, also because they need to do that because of the war.
We've got time for a very, very short comment.
If you allow me, I'd like to find the figure, because I am sure that this could be a very, very important direction for business for small and medium size. You know, generally in Ukraine, about 165,000 houses were are totally destroyed. The total area, more than 80 million square meters. I have to add that altogether, about 3,300 schools, kindergartens, universities, hospitals, etc., theater, museum, were or damaged or totally destroyed. I am sure that for Ukraine this is number one problem. Not only for people who live in Ukraine, and we have to remember about people who will return to Ukraine very soon. I know that Norway, as well as Finland, or for example even Sweden and Estonia, has a unique technology to construct, small building using the special technology, wood, which used with glue, with temperature, with pressure. I don't know. I'm economist, but for Ukrainian conditions now, This is extremely important. And it seems to me this is the business for small and medium size of company. It's possible in town or in the district of the city to construct 1,000, 100, 1000, etc., etc. Moreover, speaking about the finance or investment side of this problem, in this case, it's possible to use not only the money from your fund, it's possible to involve money from bilateral donors, from international financial institutions. It's now, there are a lot of money. Only one example. Russian military destroyed totally, I'd like to emphasize, totally destroyed 344 bridges. And small and medium-sized business is not going to wait the end of the war, it's clear. And now, 12 bridges with railway rebuilt it, and 85 temporary bridges built already. This is a vivid example. And I'm sure that speaking about housing, about infrastructure, now there is a time to start the activity, and Ukraine needs a lot. Thank you.
By that, thank you very much. It's time to start. Applaud the panel.